Welcome, everyone, to the Shrimply Good podcast, the podcast for all things Pistol Shrimp Baseball. I'm Jayce Eustice, and today I have the pleasure to be joined by owner, manager, and Mr. Pistol Shrimp himself, John Jakiemiec. John, how you doing?
I am doing great. Hello, Pistol Shrimp Nation. Thanks for joining us.
No problem. Thank you for taking the time to get on here and answer a few questions. I know a lot of people at the conclusion of the season were excited to see what's coming, but I just kind of wanted to get a question from you is, we're just about a month away from that last game of the season. And now that you kind of had a little opportunity to look back, how would you kind of sum up the first season here in Peru?
Great question. We're still kind of debriefing that. You know, I look at that from multiple perspectives. So one is, did our players get better? Did they get the things that they needed to get done before they go back to their respective schools? Did we play well as a team? And then we also look at, obviously, new in town from an operations standpoint, how did it work with the community and the fans? So, you know, on balance from the players from that side, I would have hoped, and my expectation was our one-loss record would have been a little bit better than what it was. But at the end of the day, we did play some good ball, especially towards the end. But you know, we're not going to win every year. But if I had to put a flag in where I thought we didn't meet my expectations, it would certainly be on the one-loss record. But the flip side of that is absolutely outstanding quality young men did everything we asked them to do with being in the community and all the things we look for. So from that standpoint, I'm extremely pleased with the quality of the players that we had. And I thought, you know, the same with the community. So a month out, and we do a debrief, we do a survey with fans too, and with our GM June and her staff. We gleaned some things that was a lot of it confirmed what our suspicions were, but there's also some things that were good to hear, and simple things we can do to make it better next year.
Of course, and you talked a lot about how the season went, and I want to go back all the way back to the beginning where obviously the season was a little bit different, having to make that move here to Peru, kind of throw everything together as far as ballpark operations, obviously getting the team together. But when you kind of look back to the beginning and having to throw everything together so quickly, and then also on the field having to play with a large amount of temporary players, how did that start of that season really get rolling for the team itself?
Well, and that's, I knew in part whether we were had been playing for 7 years in a facility or were brand new and like we were in Peru this year, because of the way the NCAA spring schedule was set up and amended because of COVID. I knew based on my roster we were going to have to play with a lot of temporary players early on. In a normal year, you're going to get 1 to 3 temporary players as guys are finishing up conference tournaments in that first week of regionals. So we knew it wasn't a normal year from that perspective. Never in my wildest dreams, though, did I think we would need 11 temporary players to even be able to play those first couple of weeks. So, my expectation anytime you're playing with guys that know they're not going to be around, but they're super thankful for the opportunity. My approach is to really not put a whole lot of pressure on the wins and losses, and give them as quality experiences as we can, do as well as we can. But I know it's a tough ask when you have that many temporary players. And the other thing, because of the move, our roster was pretty much set where we didn't even have the ability, if a temp player hit 700 for us, we literally had no active spots where we could graduate them to, which is tough with your temp player. I mean, I know the mentality of a temp player is I'm going to play really well and earn a spot on the team, and they're going to have to keep me around. And that just wasn't an option for us this past year. So that was difficult. We'll hold spots next year, but we couldn't have changed going into this. It was already done long before we had to make the move.
Yeah, and obviously there were some guys that were there from the very beginning that finished the year on the team, but it was a lot more frequent to see guys that kind of came into camp a couple weeks, even a month into the season. But how was kind of the morale, and how did the team kind of come together as they started to see those players trickle in throughout the season?
Well, you're exactly right. Most of the guys that were there from the beginning to the end typically were smaller school guys or D3 guys that their seasons ended a little bit earlier, and they end up being our lifeblood. And the reality of it is, at the beginning of the summer season, your D3 guys, your Gary Maynards, your Damon Castillos, those are guys that are frontline guys at their schools, and they played all spring long for their schools. They had a ton of at bats. So when they transition into summer ball, they're actually ahead of a lot of the D1 guys just because they've been playing more and they've been seeing pitching. So, and you saw that certainly in the first part of the year, where they were simply ahead just because of time on the water and in reps. But as you know, as we get guys filtering into camp, and starting to come together as a team, it was still a long process. We didn't really have our full roster until we were almost 3.5 weeks into the season. So that's crazy to even think about in hindsight, that you don't have your full team together until you're almost a month into a season. So, and that certainly won't be the case next year, but it does make it, no question, makes it difficult. And the other thing that I would point out, to get the guys to really start to come together, if you look at some of the guys, in particular from the D1 programs, if you look at the Big Ten guys, the Andy Nelsons, the Sam Links, the Tommy Juraks, those are young players at their Big Ten schools that, because last year was wiped out for them, they basically have not played competitive baseball in almost 2 years, because the Big Ten did not play any non-conference games this year. So every game counted in the Big Ten. So who does that hurt? Well, it hurts your freshmen that don't get to play in those midweek games against non-conference opponents to develop. So when those guys come into camp, they're literally chomping at the bit because they haven't played in 2 years, and certainly not played with any, extended looks. So it takes those guys 2 to 3 weeks to get their timing down, to get their groove. And that's why I think if you go back and really look at those three in particular, their numbers weren't great the first 2 weeks, 3 weeks, but once they got their feet under them, they were obviously rock solid contributors, and were a big part of the reason we turned it around the second half.
Yeah, definitely. I know from our broadcast perspective, it really seemed like there was a lot of games early on in the season where the team was fighting really hard and was maybe just a 1 to 2 run loss, where it seemed like a lot of games in a row that kind of came that way. What did you yourself and the team learn from those early 1-run losses that you guys were really able to carry into the second half of the season?
Yeah, as a coach, you remember the tough losses more than you remember some of the quality wins. We had 6 games where we had the lead in the 9th inning and couldn't close the deal. That completely flips the season around when you take 6 L's and flip them back to W's. I mean, that's literally what the summer came down to, in terms of us making the playoffs or not making the playoffs. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that we talk about with the players as a staff is, what we didn't do a great job in those 1-run games, those close games, is we missed opportunities for those add-on runs early in the game. And and I would say we were a fairly young team in comparison to the other prospect league teams. We did not have a whole lot of juniors and seniors on our roster, but part of that is to understand that when we have an opportunity to get those runs early in the game, even if it's to bunt a guy over or to move a guy into scoring position, we just didn't do as good a job as a well-oiled machine and a good team will do. And the flip side of that is that we started to do a much better job of that, in the second half of the season, which I know we'll talk about.
Yeah, definitely leading right into that. I know the Prospect League, how it was set up this season with kind of the first half record just basically wiped fresh, and you start fresh in that second half of the season. What did you really like about that for a team that had to start with a lot of temporary guys, got a rough start to the season, but really gave you guys that second life? How did you feel about that kind of setup?
That's a simple one. I loved it, especially when I knew we were going to have to play with a lot of temporary players, and not knowing, realistically where we were going to be standing coming out of that, and the fact that it took us so long to get all of our guys into camp, into town. I actually really appreciated the setup, and the reason the league voted to do that is. If you only, so in our case, but the reason the league does that for summer ball is they want the players to still have something to play for in the second half. And one of the concerns, if you look at just summer ball as an industry, is if guys aren't getting reps or their team's not doing well, a lot of guys will want to leave early July, go have a normal summer, go fishing, go see friends and family, and so forth. Less so in the prospect league, but it's still out there. So the thought behind doing the split season is you can get off to a bad start, flush it, and then play for something in the second half. So, in our case, we literally ended up using the first half as an opportunity to figure out who we have, what our pieces are, how we can best set up the back end of our rotation, and just kind of learn more about the pieces. And it took us longer than most clubs to do it. So for us, it was a blessing to be able to play a first half, second half. And in talking with other coaches around the league, they felt the same way. I would be stunned if the league doesn't do it again next year, because it, in my view, more than served its purpose of keeping people interested, keeping the players interested, keeping the fans interested. And so mission accomplished from that standpoint.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I know we talked about it a lot on the broadcast side, how as soon as for us, the way it kind of fell right into July is where the second half of the season came about. And we kept telling everybody on the broadcast, everybody on the podcast, like, listen, the record isn't where we want it to be right now, but it's a completely new season. And with the way that you guys started to play, I think without a doubt, I don't think you'd argue the team really started to click towards the end of the season, particularly in that last month or so. But what did you see with the guys and the team that really helped you guys to start stacking those wins together towards the end of the season?
Yeah. All three phases of the game came together for us. Our defense was good from jump, even with the temporary players. With those guys can play. Our defense was kind of our bedrock all the way through from start to finish. We've had some games where we didn't play great defense. That's going to happen in the over 60 games but by and large, and our stats reflect that. If you look at the league stats, the defense was always pretty good. But we were inconsistent offensively, those add-on runs, and our pitching was inconsistent. We could never put our good offense output coupled with our solid pitching, other than typically when Ironman's on the bump. But the reason we went on the run is that all came together, where there was a stretch over 7 to 8 games where we scored over 10 runs a game, where we just really started hitting the ball really well and getting the pitching, throwing strikes and not walking guys. When we were going bad and we struggled early on, we didn't win. We couldn't string together 2 or 3 wins to save our life. So it's just like one of those seasons where you get a little momentum, or you think you've turned a corner, and you go and have a dud the next day. But you're right. The second half, the guys kind of figured that out in terms of being a little bit more consistent, both offensively and certainly throwing a lot more strikes, especially at our ballpark, which can play small early in the day when the sun is out. It plays a lot more normal at night when the air gets a little bit heavier. But if you don't throw strikes in our ballpark, you're going to get hurt. I mean, a solo home run is not going to hurt you at Veterans Stadium, but you walk a couple of guys and then give up that fly ball. That's where you can get hurt. And I thought our pitchers did a much better job pitching to the ballpark and understanding that at home, and understanding that they just got to keep throwing strikes. And even if they give up a long ball, our team gets to hit as well.
Definitely. And I think a lot of teams around the league maybe didn't see it coming, but the Pistol Shrimp really came out of nowhere at the end of the season, really made it a tight playoff push there with Danville. I know pretty much every day for a few weeks we were all scoreboard watching, seeing what they were doing. They were probably seeing what we were doing and made it close there at the end. But what did that mean for you, the players, just the entire team, to say like, hey, we've struggled throughout this season, but we're right here at the end with a chance to get into those playoffs?
Yeah, number one, the thing that I'm really pleased with is our players knew where they stood, and our players actually wanted to play for something. We had guys that actually cared about team and cared about winning, and actually wanted to win, versus it's summer ball. I'm here to get my reps, and it is what it is. And there's a big difference. Believe me, there's a big difference. And we try the schools that I generally get my players from. We make an effort to go to the schools that will send us guys that actually are going to be there for the full summer, that want to get better, and that actually want to win. That it's not, that they really want to win. So, for example, when I look at the guys from the University of San Diego, the Will Worthingtons of the world, those guys are all about team and are all about what does it take to win a game. I'll pick on Will for a second, but Will on his own would lay down sacrifice bunts when the game required, or the situation called for a sacrifice bunt. I didn't have to give him a sign to do the right thing for the team, right? And so when you get a bunch of guys that are all in it together and want to win for each other, and that organic chemistry just starts to happen, good things happen. And again, it's not, you hit it on the, at the beginning, we didn't have a full team literally for so long. And it takes, by the time once you get all the guys into camp, you still need time to gel, from bus rides and playing together and knowing where a guy's going to be, and knowing what a pitcher's tendency is or what a hitter's tendency is. So that just takes time. And we got once we got our legs under us, yeah, we were a really good team. And I know because we're really strong at the starting pitching. I know some teams, they were throwing their best pitchers at us, and best because they did not want us making the playoffs. Because in a one-game scenario, I'm convinced, I know we could beat any team in the league. Period.
Yeah, definitely. And you talked about the team just wanting to win, and it seems like the team really did come together. And from all the post-game interviews I did throughout the season, that seemed to be a common thread, was all these guys are saying, look, we're a talented bunch of kids. We know we can play. And as soon as we put it together, we're a scary team. And it seemed to really kind of just live within the dugout, live within the clubhouse for you guys. And I got to ask about these players. I know you've said a lot about them, about how great they've been. And I think a lot of people in the community have seen it. But what can you just say about this group of guys that you were fortunate enough to have on your team this summer?
Extremely fortunate enough to have them. The tell for me is when you wrap a season, and you look around, guys are hugging each other goodbye, and they stay in touch on the group chats and all that stuff. And they genuinely enjoy each other's company. That's a big deal. And we're at our particular, we finished at home, where we let the fans and the kids come onto the field at the end. So it's extremely hectic at the end, and it's not your typical goodbye where you're kind of removed from that. But in our conversations with players, a big part of this for me is when I ask players if they want to come back next year, and so many of them want to come back next year, which tells me they enjoyed the experience, they enjoyed the community, they enjoyed the vibe, they had fun playing baseball. And we had a group of guys that our guys were fresh at the end of the year. No one had to play every single day and just be worn out and really looking exhausted at the end. And I think actually that had a lot to do with how our one-loss record improves, because our guys were fresher than a lot of other teams. But I'm really happy that the guys, and it's different every year. They come in from all over the country, and every year is a little bit different. But this year, I'm really personally satisfied and overwhelmed with what a good group of guys we had this year.
No, definitely. And, I kind of have to ask about some individual players throughout the season. I know you, from a coaching perspective, obviously the goal of the prospect league is to see these players grow and to continue to get better throughout the season. But what are just some areas and maybe some players that you could just kind of focus in on and say, like, he really improved in this aspect of his game throughout the summer?
Yeah, I'm gonna we'll leave Ironman aside. He was a statistical anomaly unto himself. But one of the guys that it may come as a surprise, to the podcast listeners, but Keyshawn Ogans, we knew when we brought in Keyshawn that he was an everyday player for Cal, but his calling card at Cal is his defensive ability, is his glove, and for the University of California, Berkeley. He generally batted in the 9-hole form in that second leadoff spot, if you will. And we made the decision that we were going to put him at the top of the lineup to challenge him, but also give him the opportunity to see a lot more sliders, a lot more stuff that you typically don't see if you're, that fastball only part of the lineup. So his growth, to me, was phenomenal. And what I'm really looking forward to, and I follow all these guys in the spring, right? We see what they did in the summer. I want to see how they do next spring for their college teams. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Keyshawn does in a Pac-12 schedule. Even if they, wherever he hits in that lineup, he'll hit in that lineup. But I think he's going to surprise his Cal coaches with how much he's improved offensively, because he really settled in. And I think, so one, he's obviously came in great defensively, but I think he's going to surprise some people in the Pac-12. I look and I go down the list, some other guys that I thought really improved a lot. I thought Andy Nelson, from where he was at the beginning to where he was at the end, I think he's a guy that can play on any college team in America with his combination of speed, athleticism, power, strength. And I think he's going to turn some heads at Iowa, and hope he gets a good extended run there, because I think his growth from where, like I said, from where he first came in and having not played in 2 years to being a really tough out and really good defensive player by the end was fantastic. And I thought, my other guy who I consider the glue of the team is Will Worthington. Will, again, was a fairly regular player for the University of San Diego, but for us, ended up being, an everyday setup hit for us, basically in the 2-hole. Once we figured out the best place to use him, really knows the game and really understands. And it's hard because they're all trying to figure it out and put up numbers and all that. But when you get guys that actually play for team and play for the guy next to them, beautiful things can happen. And Will Worthington personifies that for me, which is why when the season wraps, when I start to reach back out to coaches, I let the San Diego coaching staff know I want Will Worthington back. Period. Yeah. So that's how highly I think of a lot of these guys.
Yeah, definitely. And when you guys were playing your best stretch offensively, I think without a doubt, it was really the top of that lineup with a lot of those guys, like you just said, Keyshawn Ogans, Will Worthington, Andy Nelson, mixing Colton Coca in there, Blake Atkins, those type of players that really can do a little bit of everything. It's really what kind of brought your offense together. We talked a lot about it throughout the season. It seemed to be built very contact heavy. And when you guys were playing your best, it was, stringing together base hits, doubles, just doing the little things right. But those guys at the top of the lineup showed that they got some pop as well in Keyshawn and Andy Nelson.
Yeah, they really do. And that, which is why, in fact, because of that, if you look at our numbers, we didn't really steal a lot of bases. And we talked about that. Even guys that could steal bases, like a Keyshawn or a Nelson, they would pick their spots to do it. But offensively, because we're getting production out of those guys, literally you're in scoring position from first base with some of those guys at the top, just the way they were swinging it at the end. In fact, I think if you look at our our stolen bases, we did more on the road in other ballparks than we did at home. But that was by design in large part because of what those guys can do at the top.
Yeah, definitely. And you were
And
fortunate
then,
enough.
well, even a Damon Castillo, who had an
Oh, of course.
outstanding year, his power numbers were off the charts for us. So yeah, as if you look at the way that lineup was constructed, there were some guys that could absolutely thump it.
Oh, definitely. And going over the other side of the ball on the pitching side, you were fortunate enough to have a undoubted ace on your staff and Ryan Ironman. And I know it's kind of hard. We've spoken so much about it, but you just kind of had to sum up how Ryan Ironman was able to put together this historic season for the Pistol Shrimp and what you look forward to seeing from him moving forward.
Yeah, and it, number one, I was really, and I know he is, but to be recognized by the Prospect League as not only the starting pitcher of the year, but the Pro Prospect Player of the Year. That's not decided on by the commissioner. That's voted on by field managers. And obviously not all field managers got to see him in person, but when you look at those stats, it's a pretty compelling case. So I want to acknowledge those other field managers who did see him, who went out of their way to say it was a no-brainer on who they thought the best pitcher in the league was. I would say I've known Ryan for a few years, and so I'm not surprised, or wasn't surprised, that he pitched well. But obviously, I would have never predicted just the overwhelming, dominant performances and numbers that he put up. He's still, to me, he's still a young guy. He's 22. He's not a grizzled veteran. So his best years are still in front of him. And I think as he still hasn't completely physically matured yet. So I know there's a couple more miles of velocity in the tank for him. And I really expect that he'll be playing at the next level. Certainly by this time next year, without a doubt in my mind, if he continues on this track. And he works hard. What people don't know about him is, he does the stuff outside of the field that he needs to do to be ready to compete. And he loves to compete. I mean, if you watch, he works really quickly, so his defense loves to play behind him. He loves to compete. He enjoys the banter with the other team. It doesn't bother him at all. He just really, really enjoys baseball. He's a kid, of all the kids that complained about the Prospect League having a pitch count, Ryan Ironman wore me out every time I had to take him out at 95 pitches to tell me how stupid the Prospect League rule was.
Yeah.
And I would say, as it applies to Ryan Ironman, yes, it's a silly rule. But for other mortal human beings, there's a good reason that they have that rule in place. But obviously, I'm super happy for him, and I really look forward to seeing him at the next level.
No, and definitely. And wrapping up this first season here in Peru, obviously a successful season in many accounts. 2 All-Stars and Keyshawn Ogans, Ryan Ironman, obviously the prospect of the year, the pitcher of the year. You had a 20-game hitting streak on your team. You had the strikeout record there in Ryan Ironman. You had a bunch of great moments. It seemed like almost every player had like a game that you could call was their game. I know a lot of people got excited for Nakuba Booker Jr.'s game he had there towards the end. I think he went 3 for 5, a home run, and was really getting it going.
And smiling from ear to ear.
Oh, that was fantastic. I was going down on the field to talk to someone for post-game interview like I did. And before I even got to him, I think 5 players said, "You got to talk to Book. You got to talk to Book." And I was like, okay, I'm going to talk to Book. That was who I was going towar's, but I had to make sure.
You know what? That's the team we had, though. Those are guys that are come up to you, and you're doing an interview, and that's their player of the game. They wanted to recognize him. That's awesome. No, but you're right. It was a road game at Clinton, but Danny Wustenfeld hitting for the cycle.
Of course. Yeah.
Let me tell you, it doesn't happen that often, but he hit for the cycle on a day that both his father and his grandfather made the road trip. So it's a pretty cool thing. It's a pretty cool thing when something like that happens for a family, for a kid in a family, that, no matter which way life goes for that family, they'll always have that. It's very, very cool.
Of course, and just being there or hearing Clinton's announcer going, he's a home run shy of the cycle and then does it in a grand slam just
Yeah.
to cap it off. I was like, just have a day. But all those memories kind of wrapped up first season here in the Illinois Valley. Just what is you as the manager and owner looking forward to continuing to grow and just prosper here in the Illinois Valley moving forward?
Yeah. From the 10,000-foot view, the league itself is in a great spot. We're still looking at, and it would not surprise me if we have expansion for next summer. So I know that's very much on the agenda of the owners meeting coming up here in October, that there's cities and clubs that have expressed interest in joining the Prosper League. So from a standpoint, the league standpoint, we've got a great footprint. We've got a great product. We've got great coaches. So we're very much in the ascendancy and really positioned well. Drilling down a little bit more locally, we're already looking at next year's roster. So the way we do it is, we evaluate where we need to get better. I have conversations with the college coaches of the players that play for us to kind of debrief to see what our evaluation is, if it syncs with what the coach's evaluation is. And then we start to, number one, look at the colleges that sent us players, if they're going to send any from last year, if they're going to send them back, if they're going to, what the thought process is there, and then filling in the roster. So we've already begun working on next year's roster. And the reality is, we're not going to have, nothing, we haven't sent out any contracts. It's all completely speculative, but I would expect close to 50% of this year's roster to be back next year. And I hope it's that, because there's already familiarity with both, obviously from the teammate standpoint, but also the community, the field, how it plays, the comfort level, and we just build off of that, which I think will be awesome, both for the community and for our players. And then we'll fill in, for example, I already know we're going to have 4 Rainbow Warriors from the University of Hawaii next year, that the coach who sent us players in the past has already reached out to me to let me know that get ready, but I'm gonna, you're gonna have 4 Rainbow Warriors.
Wow.
In Peru next year. So that'll be fun, right? And I think
Yeah.
some of them will be from the mainland. They're not all from the islands, but I know a couple of them are from the islands. So so we're already looking at next year and filling in that roster. So from the other thing I'm trying to do, because this is my opportunity to breathe a little bit, is because we have no one under contract and everything's up in the air, it gives me the opportunity to sign some local Illinois Valley players. And so we're hoping to do that. We're in the process of reaching out to some schools that we know have players in the area. And we get that. It's always better when we can have some locally recognized players to help with the fan base and all that kind of stuff. So we've got an opportunity to do that, and hopefully that's one of the things we're trying to get accomplished this fall. And then we're also obviously we're looking forward to continue to build bridges in the community, building that brand awareness, and taking it to the next step. And we're already working with the city in terms of areas of capital improvements, experience improvements, what's realistic and so forth. So we're really looking forward to to be back. We still need to solve the long-term stadium issues, but we all want the same thing at the end of the day. So there'll more to come on that stuff, but we're absolutely looking forward to announcing some player signings as we get into the fall, and doing the stuff in the local community and South Claw Sam out and about. So we expect to see a big jump next year in terms of involvement with the community. But from a first year standpoint, June and her staff did a fantastic job. And I know the reality is more people in the Illinois Valley know June than know John, and that's okay. But we're looking forward to building on what I think by all accounts was a really fun summer, and a lot of smiles all around. So I couldn't be more thrilled with how the summer went, in terms of being in a new community, and hopeful for the future. And I guess that's what I would leave you with, Jayce, is we're really excited and hopeful for the future.
Definitely. I couldn't agree with you more. And I know a lot of people here in the area are super excited to see it continue here and want to see it continue to grow. And John, I thank you so much for taking the time to join me here on this episode of the Shrimply Good podcast. I know everybody's super excited to kick off next season. I know we just got this last season underway, but still a lot of work to do behind the scenes. But for anybody who can't get enough Pistol Shrimp, stay tuned to all of our social media pages. We'll continue to bring you content throughout the off season. Like John said, announce some player signings, keep going with the Shrimply Good podcast. Just keep things rolling, continue to put out content for you guys who just can't get enough. So once again, I'm Jayce Eustice, and I was joined by Mr. John Jakiemiec. So long, everybody.